First of all, I would like to thank my two colleagues, Dr. Edyta Krzysztofik and Dr. Iryna Kozak-Balaniuk. You are my stars, my mentors in this project. I am very honored to work with you. Also, you correcting my analysis or articles. I am learning a lot, so I am proud to give my expertise, but also learn from you. You are experts in your discipline. I can also see other friends of mine here, and especially our Ukrainian friend, Professor Volodymyr Pilipenko, whom we met in Brussels. I'm very happy to see you, sir, and Slava Ukraini.
Heroям слава.
I am very looking forward, my colleagues. They have very optimistic topics for today's conference. My speech is less optimistic / negative, and I will briefly say why. Personally, I do hope there will be the court for the Russian aggression war crimes, but again, based on my research, on international experience, on international criminal law practice, I am unfortunately negative. I don't think such court will be established because, yes, we do have legal instruments, but what is missing? Political will. And I can tell you that even yesterday I came back, but whole last week I've been to a conference in Turkey. I was talking to different NATO officers because I'm also a NATO consultant in law of armed conflict, and states are not willing to pursue this legal fight for Ukraine because they still think about post-conflict interest, energy supplies, because again we put some sanctions on Russia. But I am asking, where are sanctions on diamonds? Where are sanctions on gold? And here, countries like Belgium are very consequently opposing that. So if we are not united in the sanction level, how about gathering countries and international acceptance of establishing international court against Russia? Because of course the court will persecute people of Russia, but the international signal would be that this court is against Russian Federation. And if we want to hear that or not, Russia has its allies, the countries who are voting for or at least abstain to vote against Russian Federation. And here I mean whole global South. Here I mean Southeast Asian countries, and of course China. So the topic we agreed to have today for a few minutes, it's lack of effective international mechanisms for enforcing international responsibility. So effective international mechanism, because you lawyers, you know that there are international mechanisms for enforcing international responsibility. So the path, international one, is there. And I will say a few words how we could do that. But again, those mechanisms seem not to be effective. Effective in a sense that, yes, we can start the proceeding, we can file, and yes, there can be some beginnings of it. But when it comes to collecting evidence, to having prosecutor to enter, to finally give the judgment, here I am very negative that will ever happen, because that never happened before. I will only repeat that in the history of international criminal law, there was 0 head of states who were persecuted by international jurisdiction. Yes, some people say, yeah, how about Charles Taylor in Sierra Leone? But that was internationalized court. So some lawyers, including myself, think that that was mixed court. That was rather internal court with some international mechanism, but that was not internationally based, embedded in international law court. And also, when we look at international criminal court cases, 31 cases, most were about African countries. And when we look at the victims, not victims, people responsible for war crimes, for those war criminals being persecuted, they are anyhow heads of states. They are some, people responsible for military coup or some other paramilitary leaders, but not heads. So not those who were saying, now we will pursue genocide. So again, from the practice, we don't have similar cases. And again, as very greatly Dr. Irina said, if such court against Russia would be held, under which crime? Not genocide, not war crimes, maybe aggression. So again, it's also tricky, because if we are now not agreeing even on the crime which that tribunal will work about, so then we're like, okay, so it's just the first step. So ladies and gentlemen, first, of course, we have International Criminal Court, and I say that the same as happened in 2022 in March, exactly 16th, that there was this famous warrant arrest against Vladimir Putin and the woman, I don't recall her name, responsible for kidnapping Ukrainian children, because that was indeed kidnapping and bringing those children on the territory of Russia. Unfortunately, ICC had no legal basis to issue that, because Russia is outside. It withdrew after unfavorable jurisdiction in 2016. So 2 years after annexation of Crimea, ICC issued a judgment that it is illegal to occupy Crimea, and we expect Russian troops to withdraw from that territory of Ukraine. What Russia did, no, that is clearly against us. This is violating the principle of neutrality of the court, so they withdrew. So on this sense, and again, ICC is not ICJ. ICC only applies to members of international statute of the court, so Rome Statute. And of course, we could talk about exceptions, yes, but to have Russia in front of ICC, we would again need to have international support, international agreement that yes, Russia is the perpetrator, like we had after Second World War against Nazi Germany and Japan, that those countries, they agreed to be held responsible, accountable in front of the court. In this case, none of us is that naive that Russians would be like, yeah, sure, go ahead. They don't see their fault. They don't see their legal responsibility. They even put the blame on Ukraine. So this is out. We can talk about United Nations body being International Criminal Court of Justice. But then again, there we have also Russian judges, and they would never say anything against their own country, even though that they are obliged to rule in total neutrality, not to be biased by own nationality. But because in the Big Five, and I always say this is very colonial system, that Russia and China are in Big Five, China will always vote in pro of Russia. And two gentlemen, presidents of Russia and China, recent connections, they also showed internationally that those totalitarian regimes, they will stick together. They said openly that they will now guide international law, rule-based order, which shows us that they would never align in our Western civilization methods of international criminal law. They have their own interpretation and they will stick together. Then there is an ad hoc possibility that yes, we are legally able to establish such court. But to do so, again, we might need to think, and my colleagues will talk more, but again, from my perspective, a few words, where in Ukraine, presumably, but with Ukrainian judges. Do we have them? Because they don't have experience in ICC, because also, again, Ukraine is not part of ICC. Should we have international courts, but then, sorry, international judges? So it's very tricky. And again, international political will is missing. Again, I hear this almost every day when I talk to foreign, especially Western European colleagues, officers, professors. They all want to come back to pre-war conditions. This is very sad, this is very worrying, but the same happened with Kenyatta, former president of Kenya, that he was also accused of killing people, of committing genocide, but countries who filed the case against him, they withdrew their statements. So in the official explanation of ICC why Kenyatta was not persecuted, we read that there were no witness or they withdrew their statements. Again, why? Thinking that it's better to keep Kenyatta in his office at the cost of the status quo in regional African economic and other political relations. This is very painful, but again, it shows that countries prefer to focus on economy than on pursuing international justice. And finally, what I said, internationalized or mixed court, like the one for Sierra Leone. It's possible, but then Ukraine could not afford doing this by themselves. They would need international support. They would need international money for doing that, because that requires a lot of funds, as you can, of course, imagine. So again, who would pay for that? And even if we would have that court, who would make sure that those persecuted, they would be held accountable? Because I don't even think that even if we will have a judgment against Vladimir Putin or Shoigu or anyone from his crew, would Russia extradite them? Absolutely not. So should we wait until they cross the border, or airplane will finally, land on some country which would be happy to do the extradition? I don't think so either. If it's legally possible, yes, it is. But would that be politically possible? No, I think this is so-called legal fiction. And again, the last thing, head of state, immunity. If we like it or not, Vladimir Putin and all his generals, they do have immunity under international law. So first we would have to get rid of that immunity, which is not easy, because Kremlin will always support them. And even though Vladimir Putin will suddenly fall down from stairs or fall down from window, as those things happen usually in Russia, he would be easily replaced by another person. So that's why, again, I'm unfortunately negative about such a positive outcome, like how in practice to pursue this proceeding. Yeah, and I think ladies and gentlemen, I will stop here, because I'm very interested to hear the two further panelists and have discussion, because we are all here to make a change. And again, even though what I am saying is bitter, I prefer to be the bad guy in this crowd, but again, to find every possible option and to move on, because I know that Poland can do so much for Ukraine, not only humanitarily, but also legally. So again, ladies, Irina, Edyta, thank you for having us today.